Just before he died in 1992, director John Sturges spoke about his 1963 film, The Great Escape. He talked about the inspiration for the character of Virgil Hilts, played by Steve McQueen. Sturges said one of the characters in the actual story that we based Steve's part on was a man called Jones. We wanted to be able to substantiate the fact that there was an American in this thing who had the kind of go-to-hell atmosphere around him that they all had. Jones certainly had that, and he had a pretty good career after the war, too. This is the story of the real Virgil Hilts. This is the story of a man called Jones.
I was born in Coos Bay, Oregon. I hate to say it, it was the 18th of December, 1913. 1936, I was commissioned in the Cavalry Reserve, and I went on active duty at Fort Bliss, Texas. Spent a marvelous year there. One day I ran across a good friend. "Where are you going, Norm?" He said, "Well, I'm going to the hospital and take a flight physical. I'm going to go be an aviator." Well, that sounded really interesting, so I said, "I'll go with you." I got a wire back in the middle of June, enlist Jones as a flying cadet. Off I went to Randolph Field, and then entered the class of 38B. That was the first time I ever flew. And incidentally, I got sick. And I didn't eat breakfast for 8 months. We entered with about 165 cadets and graduated 78 a year later. The Air Force was already starting to build up a little bit. The whole of 1941, we were literally on maneuvers, working our fanny off. On the 1st of December, we headed for the West Coast, and we were to start maneuvers against the Navy in the San Diego area. Lo and behold, on the morning of 7th of December, the world knows what happened. Everybody rushed around then, and it really shocked you. It was more, boy, let's get at it. Roosevelt said, "We have got to do something. We got to make a move." Lieutenant Major Doolittle was supposed to organize it and set up the mission to send a task force as close as we could to bomb Tokyo and proceed to an airfield in China. And he looked far and wide throughout the Air Force to find the most skillful, bravest, honest, and he picked the 17th Bomb Group. Parenthetically, we're the only people who had B-25s. He asked for volunteers, and everybody volunteered.
A careful check of the records of each crew member was made, and the 24 most experienced and competent crews were nominated.
And then we moved to Eglin. The Navy sent over a lieutenant to help us with all the procedures. He'd never seen a tricycle gear airplane or a twin-engine airplane, and we'd never seen a carrier, so it was the blind leading the blind.
During intensive training at Eglin Air Force Base, the best 16 out of the original 24 were selected to go on the mission. They were therefore all volunteers, thrice picked over for selection. Of the 16 first pilots selected, Davy Jones had the highest rating as a pilot. He was a natural.
1st April, we were under the Golden Gate Bridge. The captain said, "Now hear this. We are bound for Tokyo." We had 2 cruisers and 4 destroyers with us. Worked pretty hard on the ship. On the morning of the 18th, at about daybreak, the task force was discovered by a Japanese picket boat. This time it's 7 o'clock in the morning. We had to clear the deck one way or another so that fighters could operate and protect the fleet. Either roll us overboard or we take off and fly somewhere. Word came on the loudspeaker, "Army crews man your aircraft." Crew chief ran out, topping off the tanks on the airplane, stacking in 5-gallon tins of fuel, standing around shaking. We had hoped to be within 400 miles, 650 miles was our limit. We were 800 nautical miles from Tokyo when we were discovered. It's obvious we were in deep trouble as far as having enough fuel to make destination. You couldn't make it back to Hawaii. We couldn't make it to the Aleutians. There was no place to go except Japan. About an hour out, I guess, Joe Mansky, my gunner, crew chief gunner, he was 18 years old. He called up and he said, "Sir, we don't have enough gas." And I said, "That's right." Click. Yeah, end of story. The anxiety was getting a little high. At one point in time, Hoss Wilder, my co-pilot, he decided to have a sandwich. Well, I had a sandwich. We took a bite. We must have chewed that thing for 5 minutes. We looked at each other and we threw it out. It was so dry, we couldn't make enough saliva. You couldn't even eat an orange. Made landfall, hit the deck, and we were lost. People were waving at us, and you'd see over farm people and so on. But we got to do something. We can't just keep doing this. We got to get rid of these bombs. So we turned south. About that time, we broke out over water and realized it was Tokyo Bay. We headed across the bay toward our target. I had a tank farm. We were going pretty fast. It wasn't very good. Ahead of us was a factory. You could drop the incendiary on that. That was no problem. And there was it's a power station, and I did get a hit there. And we hit the deck. I'm up to about as fast as that airplane would go, and got over the water, and we throttled back, and we settled out about 150 miles an hour. Navigator taking sunline, running sunlines. He called me. He said, "Man, we picked up a tailwind of about 40 knots that we did not expect. By the time we hit the tip of Kyushu, he said, we got juice to make it to go all the way. And had we not had that wind, none of us would have made the coast." And they moved us to Algiers, and that's when we started then flying missions. And our target was at Bizerte, the airport, and there were 100 or more German airplanes there. Here we go charging along with our 9 airplanes. Before I got to the target, bam, I got hit, the left engine. Put the airplane down, 2 little knobs on the little flat place, and it took the wings off, and we just slid along on our belly. The poor guy in the nose, he went through the nose, and then we ran over him. He was laying in the back, 100 yards back. My co-pilot was out. We all got out of the airplane. We picked up a flap that had been knocked off, picked up the bombardier, put him on this, and we trekked off north toward the beach. And we hadn't walked half a mile. And here, a whole skirmish line, a whole squad of German soldiers. The corporal said, "You know, the classic for you, the war is over, or come with me." So that was it. Dulag Luft was the central interrogation point. All prisoners went there first. So you're in solitary about, I don't know, I guess a week. It sort of gets to you. The interrogation started, you start out rank and number and so on, and then he told you what squadron you belonged to, when you got from the States, where you were in England, when you got to Africa. He knew everything about you, and you could either nod or not nod. And you got the cigarette bit. I was interrogated maybe, I guess, 4 times. We always told ourselves, amongst ourselves, only the Lord knows what we said. They loaded us in the car and we shipped us to Saigon, and we walked from there to the permanent camp. You get to the gate and all the old guys are standing in the gate waiting for you. So you know somebody knows you, and they say, "Hey, goddamn Jones, what are you doing here?" As if it isn't pretty obvious what you're doing.
Are all American officers so ill-mannered?
About 99%.
Then perhaps while you are with us, you will have a chance to learn some. 10 days isolation, Hilts.
Captain Hilts.
We maintained the military hierarchy all the way through. Senior officer was Lieutenant Colonel Clark, Bub Clark, and I'm a mate. I report, "Yes, sir." So he said, "Okay, I want you to move a wall." The first thing, you move a wall? Yeah, that's good. So the idea was to move the end wall, move it out a ways, so you can make a space where you can hide things. That was my first job. Of course, when you first got in there was a flurry of things hiding under the honey wagon or trucking out loads of trees and all that sort of junk, and people would get caught, but nobody got out.
Hold it!
The old Kriegies and the escape committee, they were very well organized, and they'd all been out of the wire, some of them half a dozen times. They all get caught, they bring them back, put you 2 weeks in the cooler, and turn you loose again. You couldn't just go out and escape or try to escape. You had to go to the committee.
Everybody in the camp is supposed to clear all escape attempts in advance with Squadron Leader Bartlett here.
If you got something novel, you could convince the committee, then the committee would back you, and they'd give you everything you needed, or within reason. If 2 people got out, they catch you the next morning, and they put you in the cooler for a week. If up to 5, they didn't bother you much. Over 5, the report had to go a couple echelons up. And when you got to like 20 people, it had to go clear to the top. Well, in came the Gestapo, and they would search, and they didn't know what to look for, but they were a bunch of clowns.